A simple woman was humiliated for walking onto the most elite military camp in the country, wearing thrift store shoes and a cotton blouse for having no insignia, no badge, not even a rank. One cadet asked if she was a delivery mistake. Another offered her a broom. When she didn't leave, they laughed harder, until a training mission failed, until she stepped forward quiet and unreadable and led the cadets to the fastest tactical recovery in the program's history. And when the command post demanded to know who authorized the new strategy, the screen cut to her, silent, steady, and then the general arrived by helicopter and saluted her. The camp itself looked built for control. Rows of steel barracks gleamed under the morning sun, polished like honor guards. Barbed wire framed the outer perimeter like a jawline. Tactical drones buzzed overhead, weaving between towers that housed facial recognition and live feed tracking. The air smelled of dust fuel and sweat, the blended scent of performance. Inside the camp's nerve center, a dozen high-definition screens displayed real-time footage, infrared satellite wide-angle. One drone caught the moment Emma stepped into frame, her silhouette soft against the hard lines of the training yard. She wore a wrinkled white button-down tucked into khaki pants, no visible tags or rank. Her canvas backpack was slung loosely over one shoulder. It looked like something left over from a field hospital. Her dark brown hair was tied back low and neat. Her face was bare. She walked like someone who didn't need to be noticed, and in this camp that made her impossible to ignore. From the edge of the assault course, a group of cadets clustered near a shade tent, their gear pristine, their movements easy with the confidence of bloodlines and private briefings. One of them, tall and tan with mirrored sunglasses and a $700 wristwatch, leaned against the wheel well of a parked tactical transport and stared. "That a new kitchen hire," he said aloud, loud enough to be caught by the nearest drone mic. Another cadet, blond and grinning in a matte black uniform stitched with the last name banner, cocked his head and added, "She's got logistics or cafeteria written all over her. Check the sneakers." The camera panned down. Emma's shoes were white scuffed and gray streaked from travel. They had no branding, no digital trace, just laces tied tight. More cadets gathered. In a camp like this, appearance wasn't cosmetic. It was policy. Every participant had their boots custom-fitted, their rifles engraved with crest work, their simulation kits tailored to match their sponsoring command's color palette. Family crests were not just welcome, they were expected. Emma's presence disrupted that. Near the obstacle pit, a group of recruits prepping for the combat maze paused when she passed. One of them squinted and leaned over to whisper something that made the others laugh. She didn't look at them. She kept walking, stepping lightly around the corner of a barracks where two instructors in crisp uniforms stood in conversation. One of them, Captain Riggs, paused mid-sentence as Emma passed. He narrowed his eyes. His gaze traced the lack of gear, the absence of ID, the quiet. "Excuse me," he called. "Are you lost?" She didn't answer. She offered a short nod as she moved past toward the training lot where drones hovered and fire team drills were already underway. The instructors exchanged a look. One reached for her comm. Back near the Humvee, Banner tapped on his phone, zooming in on the grainy image of Emma from the drone feed. He snapped a screenshot, circled her sneakers in red, and posted it to the internal chat under a channel titled "Today's Glitch." Text followed "Sneaker Watch Civilian or Ghost." Reactions came in seconds. Crying laugh emojis. Phrases like "base breach" and "lost" and "found." Some cadets zoomed in on her backpack, speculating if it was military surplus, thrifted, or fake. Still, she didn't speak. One of the squads rotating in from tactical review paused near her as they returned gear. Their squad leader, a third-generation Air Command trainee named Halston, nodded toward her and said, "Ma'am, this area is restricted to active groups. Civilian guests usually wait by the admin benches." Emma looked at him. Her eyes were gray. Still. She nodded again, said nothing. Halston turned back to his team and muttered, "Probably someone's girlfriend tagging along, someone's soft spot from home base." By now the drones had tagged her movement. One camera operator watching the feed noted her pattern, her straight path, her silent observation, and flagged the feed not as a security threat but as a curiosity. The tag read, "Unidentified non-uniformed presence." At the command center, the feed shifted to a wide-angle view of the grounds. On screen, a wave of tactical trainees moved in formation. One small figure centered in the frame walked calmly between activity zones, out of place not for what she did, but for how little she needed to do to be noticed. Someone watching somewhere far above their rank tapped a finger against their screen. Tracker, they said. Back on the ground, one of the tech cadets tossed a sports drink bottle onto the ground a few feet ahead of Emma. It rolled across her path, wobbling until it tapped the toe of her shoe. She stopped, bent down, picked it up, and carried it to the bin. She didn't look around. She didn't react when a pair of cadets muttered "field assistant" under their breath as they passed. She didn't blink when another whispered, "She's probably somebody's +1 who doesn't know the rules." Emma walked through the field like she'd seen it before. Not recently, not fondly, but with a memory that didn't need repeating. A live drone still tracking her zoomed out slightly. She was a dot on a field of polished uniforms, measured ranks, and raised voices. She was the only one not trying to be seen. And that was why none of them could stop looking. She didn't belong. And they were right, but not for the reason they thought. She didn't leave. That was what made them escalate. The first wave had been laughter, whispers, questions asked loud enough to sting, but quiet enough to feign innocence. But when Emma stayed, when she didn't retreat to a bench, didn't ask where to go, didn't explain herself, the camp's quiet contempt began to sharpen. Not because she had done anything, but because she hadn't apologized for being seen. At 10:03 a.m., just after the second rotation of drills concluded, the air thick with dust and drone hum, the camp's senior field instructor approached her. Major Clifton was known for his precision. His clipboard was part of his posture, held in front of his chest like a badge of certainty. He stopped a full step from her and let his eyes scan down her frame before speaking. "This training perimeter is closed to uncredentialed observers," he said, voice even, but loud enough for passing cadets to hear. "I'll have to ask you to relocate to the visitors' platform." She stood still, feet planted, hands folded loosely at her front. The breeze lifted her shirt slightly at the hem, revealing nothing that explained her presence, nothing that excused it. She met his eyes for a moment, then gave a small nod. But she didn't move. Not yet. Clifton waited. When she simply stepped aside, allowing a group of cadets to pass without interference, he made a note on his clipboard and turned away. His expression didn't change, but a quiet thread of dissatisfaction followed in his wake. 3 cadets trailed behind him, their low voices picked up by a drone mic from overhead. "She thinks she's untouchable. Probably sleeping with someone in ops. Or she forged her way in. She doesn't even have base ID." Their words crackled over a monitoring headset in the control center, where the operator turned the volume down, then marked the conversation as unremarkable. It was easier that way. Less paperwork. Just after 11, as the third wave of simulation prep began, a logistics officer intercepted Emma near the main quad. Lieutenant Mara Voss. 29, known for her tight bun and tighter boundaries, caught sight of the scuffed canvas shoes approaching the digital supply board and moved quickly to block the path. "You're not on the equipment manifest," she said. Her tone was clipped, controlled, the kind used when dealing with lost packages or unauthorized vendors. Emma said nothing. Behind her, a cadet leaned in toward another and whispered, "Maybe she's here to observe field disorder. Some kind of report." Voss frowned. "This isn't an open forum. Civilian oversight requires clearance. I'll ask that you." Emma turned slightly, avoiding physical proximity, and stepped out of the way. Voss adjusted her clipboard and made a note, more to be seen doing it than to document anything of value. She called after her just loudly enough. "There's a designated civilian waiting area for a reason. Don't make security an issue." The words echoed off the quad walls like static. By noon, screenshots of Emma were circulating in 2 internal group chats, one among cadets labeled Camp Extras, and another among mid-level staff called Field Oddities. In one image, a cadet had drawn a fake clearance badge on her chest with the label Lost Ghost, unauthorized. Another showed a zoom on her backpack annotated with "Contains snacks and secrets." No one flagged the messages. At 12:27 p.m., during a midday break, a group of cadets gathered near the hydration station just outside the barracks. It was hot, the sun pushing heat into the backs of their necks, and the mood had turned from amusement to sport. Emma had paused in the shade of the central oak, her canvas backpack resting lightly on one shoulder, her face unreadable. A squad leader named Ben Trace walked past her slowly. His boots were spotless. His rank had been earned mostly by name. As he approached the station, he uncapped a half-full bottle of water and tipped it as if to cool his hand. He turned slightly. The stream of water landed directly on the toes of Emma's shoes. She looked down. He didn't. A cadet nearby laughed. "Oops," someone muttered, watering the weeds. The bottle hit the trash can with a loud thunk. The squad dispersed quickly like the moment had only happened by accident. But the next drone pass caught the stain across her canvas toe, caught the way she shifted her weight just slightly like the chill had finally reached her socks. She didn't speak. At 1:04 p.m., two instructors passing on the way to the command trailer commented in low tones that still managed to carry. "She's still here. No one's claimed her. Maybe she's a test case. Psychological ops." That'd be generous. In the mess tent, a junior training analyst stood near the back holding a printed roster list. He tapped the sheet, frowning. "Her name's not in the intake." His partner shrugged. "So what? She'll be gone by morning." But she wasn't. At 2:17 p.m., while cadets ran perimeter recon drills, Emma walked the length of the secondary training lot. Her wet shoes left faint tracks that dried quickly behind her. She paused near a first aid tent and glanced at the map on the exterior wall, an old habit not for orientation, but observation. A tech officer nearby watched her carefully, then turned to another and said, "Get her off my station feed." The other nodded, switching to thermal overlay. That didn't stop the cameras. The main drone still tracking her zoomed out slowly, framing her between squads, not participating, not interfering, just present. Still. At 3:33 p.m., a private group message among instructors shared a still image from that feed. The caption read, "Has anyone informed her this isn't an internship?" The group reacted with approval. By 4:00, the ground beneath her shoes had dried. The stain had faded, but the thread of disdain around her presence had not. At 4:15, a field commander gave a short briefing on the next day's tactical simulation. Emma was seated alone on the edge of a concrete barrier, her head slightly tilted. One cadet paused mid-question when he saw her. He leaned over and whispered, "She's still watching us, like she's taking notes." On what, someone asked. On how dumb we are, maybe. The laughter that followed was brief, nervous, unsteady. At 4:42, a final internal message pinged through an admin loop. "Unknown civilian has not exited grounds. Surveillance active. No action required." They didn't ask who she was. They only recorded that she hadn't left. And that was enough to keep watching her. At 0600, the air over St. Hawthorne Strategic dropped 5 degrees. Clouds held back the sun, casting the training grounds in muted gray. Cadets stood in staggered formation along the perimeter fence boots, tight helmets, gleaming radios checked twice. It was the final assessment, what they called the trial. A full-scale jungle simulation designed to mimic the chaos of real conflict. 10 teams, 40 hours, satellite maps, live field drones, mock casualties, no resets, no second chances. The scenario: navigate dense terrain, build a forward operating base, defend it under simulated assault, and recover a stranded unit deep in hostile territory. It was the toughest test the camp had ever engineered. Emma watched from the gravel path just outside the command trailer. She stood with her hands folded behind her back, her backpack slung low, her shoes still watermarked from the previous day. She said nothing as the instructors handed out encrypted mission tablets. Said nothing as the first squad leader misread the topographic lines on the southern map. Said nothing as Team 4 pushed too far into the ridge line and lost comms within the first 20 minutes. The failure unfolded quickly. Team 7 misinterpreted a terrain signal and set up a camp in a compromised valley. Team 2's perimeter collapsed before noon when they deployed 3 units without backup. Radios buzzed with partial reports and scattered panic. No one had a full picture. Squad leaders spoke over one another. Instructors tried to stabilize communications, but every decision took too long. One cadet at the command trailer stammered through a misread grid reference. A junior staffer hit mute on her headset, turned to the chief monitor and whispered, "They're unraveling." Emma didn't move. She stood just outside the marked zone, eyes fixed on the digital map displayed across the central screen. Her posture didn't shift, but her gaze tracked each failure: the collapsing flank, the team that overshot its supply drop, the missing satellite ping from a rescue unit stranded near the ridge. The drones kept recording. Inside the trailer, the operations director leaned toward his second and muttered, "We're about to lose 3 teams." One cadet, breathless and flushed, broke into the trailer to request additional simulation support. Team 5 has no idea where they are, he said, voice rising. Command post is silent. 2 fire teams are pinned in low terrain. No one's answering the beacon. Silence followed. Then Emma stepped forward. She didn't look at anyone. She didn't clear her throat. She reached out and took the backup radio unit sitting on the edge of the console table lightly like she'd done it 100 times before and brought it to her mouth. "This is Ward," she said. Her voice was clear, low, and without hesitation. Team 2 fall back 20 meters from the northern tree line. Re-establish defensive spread. Elevate your signal beacon. Confirm when it hits vertical range. The room paused. A monitor tech turned toward her, startled. On the main screen, a red line blinked, then steadied, then answered. Team 2 confirmed, adjusting position. Emma didn't wait. Team 4 move east by grid 2. Do not attempt to cross the ravine. You're exposed to a simulated IED trap. Regroup at high ground Delta 47. She stepped to the map screen. Her finger traced a clean route through what had been an operational mess of false markers. She didn't raise her voice, didn't ask permission. Every word was instruction. No cadence, no explanation. Just direction. Another radio crackled. "Copy that. Team 4 moving." In the back of the trailer, someone whispered, "Who is that?" But no one answered. Emma kept going. Team 7 abandoned base perimeter. You're boxed in. Send recon to Point Echo and reroute med evac units to Rally 3. All other teams stagger positions, turn off tracking pulses, and hold until signal confirms. The instructor who had been running point on the simulation took a half step back, eyes locked on the command feed as the red markers shifted. The error gaps started to close. She turned her head slightly toward the console team. Pull satellite overlay and clear tactical clutter. Reduce to squad-level view only. The drone feed updated instantly. Teams moved. Orders executed. Not one command was questioned. Team 5, do not fire unless engaged. You are being watched. Ridge unit inbound from the east. Confirm orientation. Confirmed, holding fire. The room was still. Across the camp, on screens in classrooms and review tents, the simulation moved like someone had cut away the noise. For the first time all day, the response teams looked like a formation instead of fragments. The digital terrain map flashed green as teams made progress. No injuries, no resets, 1 rescue, 2 successful defenses, 1 completed evac. 52 minutes from chaos to full recovery. No casualties. The drones kept rolling. Emma lowered the radio. She didn't look proud, didn't glance around to gauge reaction. She set the device down with quiet care. Stepped back. The instructor who'd been monitoring the trial walked toward her, slowly, eyes flicking between her and the data feeds. "What just happened?" someone asked behind him. No one replied. The screen at the center of the trailer displayed a final simulation result. Sim complete. Duration, 52:46. Status record operation, 0 failures. A murmur passed through the tent. Someone whispered, "Fastest on record ever." Outside, cadets began returning to base perimeter. Their uniforms were dirt-streaked. Some limped slightly from exertion. Others pulled off their helmets and looked up at the drone still circling overhead. A few glanced toward the trailer, confused by the speed of resolution. Inside, no one had moved. Emma stood at ease near the side wall, her face unreadable. A young instructor tapped his notepad, paused, and looked up. "What's her name again?" No one answered. But the radio on the table still held the last call. "This is Ward." And suddenly that name wasn't just an echo. It was a question, and a silence, and a beginning. The command tent was silent. Screens still glowed from the afterburn of the simulation. A single drone feed played back the final 40 minutes in compressed time. Emma's voice issuing steady instructions, teams moving in flawless coordination, critical zones secured 1 by 1. The cadence of her orders contrasted with the chaos that had preceded them. There was no yelling, no scrambling, just clarity, precision, control. Colonel Arlen, a 40-year veteran of operations training, stood near the center screen. He watched the playback in full arms folded. His beret hung low over his brow, shadowing the surprise that tugged at his jaw. When the video ended and the last confirmation came through, record. Time 0. Failures. All teams recovered. He turned to face her. "Miss," he said loud enough to cut the tense hush. "Who trained you?" Emma looked at him, her expression calm. She stood with her hands behind her back, her stance grounded but not defensive. For a moment she said nothing. Then I trained with Joint Recon, Eastern Division. A pause, a whisper behind someone's breath. A few heads turned. Colonel Arlen's eyebrows lifted slightly. He didn't push. I stepped away 5 years ago, Emma added. Her tone remained steady, unembellished. That's all. It was more than enough. From a far corner of the tent, a member of the program's oversight committee, Director Rourke, a lean man with a sharp jaw and a clipboard always at his side, tilted his head as if turning over a puzzle piece. "Ward," he said. "Emma Ward." No one answered. He stepped toward the console and typed quickly into the system log. A search result populated the screen. For a moment the display flickered. Then came the files: classified access, special operations, history commendations, internal citations. Her service record unrolled across 3 separate overlays: Jungle Warfare Lead Tactical Intelligence Integration Medal of Service under Joint Command, all marked retired, honorably discharged. Under the final entry was a footnote: last known role Special Forces Major. The cadets watching from the open flaps of the tent said nothing. Some straightened without realizing it. Others instinctively lowered their phones. A murmur rippled outward. No one laughed now. Outside, a new sound built across the compound. Low at first, rhythmic, mechanical, familiar. The pulsing whir of rotor blades swept in from the north tree line. The air shifted. Canvas tents trembled slightly. Dust lifted off the gravel paths in spiraling wisps. A black helicopter descended slowly onto the primary landing pad. Its matte finish bore no markings aside from a small crest near the door: Strategic Joint Command. No other aircraft used that pad. It had remained empty the entire program. Until now. The blades slowed. The wind settled. The side hatch opened. General Nathan Cross stepped down first. He wore field dress, pressed but not ceremonial. His collar carried the star cluster of Supreme Operations Command. His movements were measured, his face unreadable. He crossed the field without fanfare, flanked by 2 aides who stopped at the edge of the pad. When he reached the command tent, no one called him in. He didn't need permission. He entered and stopped directly across from Emma. He didn't address the others. He didn't scan the room. He didn't look for screens or data or explanations. He looked only at her. And then he saluted. A clean, precise motion, right hand to brow, a gesture of absolute recognition. "Major Ward," he said. His voice carried across the tent. "You haven't lost your edge." She nodded, just once. He stepped closer, turned to face the tent. "This camp failed today," he said. "Not because of the operation, but because of what preceded it. A woman with more combat hours than most of your instructors walked this ground for 2 days and was ignored, mocked, pushed aside. And when everything fell apart, she didn't say, 'I told you so.' She picked up a radio and led." No one moved. General Cross continued. "Major Ward has more operational authority in her little finger than half of you have on your intake packets. She doesn't need a badge to be obeyed. She doesn't need an invitation to be listened to. She earned the right to speak through action." Behind him, the simulation screen displayed her last field order in green text. A small icon blinked: "Operation complete." "She didn't come here to prove herself," he said, "but you gave her no choice." Emma stood still. Her shoes dusted from the lot, the mark from the spilled water still faint on the canvas. Her expression hadn't changed. General Cross turned toward her again. "Your record's intact. Your legacy's intact. If you want reinstatement, it's yours. But that's your decision." She didn't answer. Instead, she turned, slightly looking past him to the cadets now gathered just outside the tent, still in formation, no longer smirking. She stepped forward. "I came here to observe," she said, "not to lead. But when the situation required it, I acted." She paused. That's the lesson. There was no applause, no wide eyes, just silence. Respect born not from title but from what had been seen. When she stepped back, Colonel Arlen cleared his throat and shifted his clipboard under one arm. "General," he said quietly, "we'll initiate a formal review of conduct." Cross nodded. "Do that." The drone outside circled once more, then banked wide over the field. The camp, once so certain of its hierarchy, now watched a woman in scuffed shoes stand taller than anyone there. No one needed to explain who she was now. They'd all seen it, heard it, obeyed it. And now they remembered. The order came before the dust had settled around the helicopter pad. It wasn't delivered as a threat. There were no raised voices, no names called. just a sequence of measured directives issued by General Cross while the camp stood still. "Begin a formal review," he said. "Compile drone footage. Flag every instance of documented harassment and institutional neglect. Full visibility. Internal distribution only for now." Staff nodded, already moving. Instructors shifted. A few cadets instinctively checked the fit of their uniforms as if realignment had a weight they could suddenly feel. The general's voice never rose. His tone carried the gravity of procedure, not punishment. Yet each word rearranged the camp in real time. Reputations that had felt untouchable a day before began to collapse, not with spectacle but with quiet efficiency. On the main feed clips from the simulation were pulled alongside earlier surveillance. The first showed Emma directing perimeter teams, the second her silent walk across the base, the third the moment a cadet dumped water onto her shoes and laughed. By mid-afternoon, a list had formed. 4 cadets were marked for immediate removal from final trial eligibility. Not suspended, not penalized, just erased from the next phase of command track. Their names vanished from the operations roster. The system didn't even blink. A message appeared on their tablets. "Training access suspended. Report to logistics." There were no protests. What could they say? 2 instructors, Captain Riggs and Lieutenant Voss, were reassigned to administrative duties off-site. No announcement was made. Their clearance was simply revoked. Within the hour, new transport orders were issued. One of them asked to speak to the general. He declined. Staff who had laughed, nodded, or done nothing were quietly recorded in the final training report. Not blacklisted, not shamed, but known, documented. A line had been drawn not in fury, but in policy. Inside the camp's digital archive, one entry was added under Required Ethics Media for future cadet cycles, Case Study 47, Bias and Operational Oversight, duration 8 minutes. It opened with drone footage of Emma standing still beside a trash can holding an empty bottle someone else had tossed. That image would become the first lesson every cadet watched moving forward. Emma said nothing through it all. She remained at the perimeter of the command center, her arms loosely folded, backpack still over one shoulder. The dust had dried around her shoes. The stain from the spilled water was nearly invisible now, but everyone who had seen it remembered. One by one, cadets passed her on their way to reset drills or exit briefings. Some glanced toward her. Others dropped their eyes as they passed. No one offered excuses. There were none to give. Director Rourke approached quietly around mid-afternoon. He stopped a full pace away and kept his voice low. "Major," he said, "I failed to extend you proper protocol yesterday. I regret that deeply." Emma met his eyes, offered a single nod. She didn't smile. She didn't offer release. He didn't ask for it. A revised camp schedule was posted by 1700 hours. A new training module titled Leadership Without Insignia was added to the next term. The course lead was listed as guest instructor, E. Ward, 1 session, optional. But already cadets had begun to ask when it would be offered. The changes didn't make headlines. There was no press, no internal email blast. But within the command network, people were watching and remembering and rethinking what authority looked like. By evening, the heat had pulled back from the ground. Emma remained on base through sunset. She declined transport, declined accommodations. A small bench near the observation ridge became her seat. From there, she watched the last drills of the day wind down under orange light. Colonel Arlen stepped onto the ridge and paused near her. "We've never had a drill end that cleanly," he said. Emma said nothing. He waited a moment, then nodded and stepped away. The drone that had tracked her since arrival dipped slightly in altitude, hovered, and captured one final frame. Her alone profile, backlit head, tilted slightly as if listening to something no one else could hear. At the far end of the lot, cadets moved in silence. They didn't salute. They didn't approach. But when she stood and walked past them to the edge of the barracks, they stepped out of her way, not like she was dangerous, not like she was royal. Like she had earned something they didn't have language for yet. Inside the camp server logs, one message marked the moment the training roster finalized for the term. It read simply, "Roster updated. Eligibility adjusted. Status resolved." That was it. No medals, no ceremony. Just a correction. Clean, absolute. The kind that only truth can make. Emma walked off the field without a sound. The lecture room was quiet when she entered. Not stiff or ceremonial, just still, like the air had taken a breath and held it. The cadets didn't stand immediately, but when Emma Ward walked through the door, Canvas shoes soft against the polished floor, they rose slowly, instinctively. Not by rule, not by rank, just out of something that hadn't been taught yet, but had settled into them all the same. Her clothes hadn't changed. The white button-down remained lightly creased from travel. The khaki pants bore faint dust from the range. Her backpack, the same canvas one she'd carried on arrival, rested in the corner of the room by her chair. The guest instructor badge clipped to her front pocket was small, temporary, the kind given to visiting advisors or civilian observers, but no one mistook her for either. The course was titled Leadership Under Pressure, 1 session, optional attendance. No one missed it. She said little. She moved slowly, carefully. The room followed her rhythm. On the screen, she projected a clean, tactical map. No clutter, no overlays. She walked the cadets through the timeline of the simulation. Not the outcome, the process. The moments that went unnoticed. The terrain that looked impassable. The gaps in radio coverage that could have left entire squads unrecovered. She didn't say you failed, she never needed to. She asked them what they saw, what they missed, when they hesitated. No one interrupted. She paused at one image, an overhead drone capture of herself walking along the gravel lot with cadets passing her in every direction. No one looking, no one stopping. No one noticing the center of the field was already holding the answer. This, she said, is what it looks like when a leader isn't recognized. She didn't need to say more. By the end of the hour, the cadets weren't taking notes. They were just listening. A few instructors stood quietly at the back of the room. One of them had once questioned her presence at the gate. Now his arms were folded across his chest, his eyes fixed on the map, nodding to himself at every pause. She ended the session without closing remarks. Just shut off the projection, lifted her backpack, and gave a nod of acknowledgement to the room. "Carry it forward," she said. "Nothing else." They stood again as she left. The updated field training manual was posted that night. It included a new paragraph under the Leadership Protocol section. All personnel are to be evaluated by behavior under pressure. Uniforms, badges, and background must never substitute for observation and conduct. The revision was written by Colonel Arlen. The suggestion had come from Emma. Her name wasn't listed. Later that week, she was offered a permanent advisory role at the command school, full clearance rank restoration transport detail. She declined without delay. Instead, she requested transport to the nearby rail junction. No security detail, no exit debrief. When she left, she carried only the backpack she came with. At the gate, a cadet who had once posted a picture of her shoes to the internal chat paused before opening the security arm. He didn't try to apologize. He just looked at her and said, "You changed everything." She shook her head once. "No," she said, "I just reminded you to pay attention." The gates opened. No fanfare followed, no announcements, no farewell salute. But back inside the camp, a new, unspoken custom took hold. When a trainee entered a room and someone was seated alone, they paused before speaking. When someone gave orders in quiet tones, they listened the first time. And when someone walked the field without credentials, no one assumed they were lost. In time, no one mentioned the woman with the canvas shoes. They just remembered what happened when she spoke. And that was enough. Emma Ward boarded her train with no bags, but one no rank, but the one others gave her without meaning to. She sat by the window, opened a small notepad, and wrote nothing. She didn't need to. The lesson had already landed, and this time it would stay. She never needed a title to prove her worth. She didn't raise her voice, demand respect, or step forward to be seen. Instead, she stood still, unnoticed, underestimated, and quietly observing a world built to overlook people like her. But when the moment came, she led with clarity, steadiness, and grace. Her power wasn't in presence, but in action. Her legacy wasn't loud, but lasting. Emma's story reminds us that leadership isn't about rank. It's about integrity when no one is watching. It's about showing up even when you're dismissed. If her quiet strength moved you, share your thoughts in the comments or follow for more stories about women who don't need a spotlight to change everything. Sometimes the most powerful voice is the one that waits until it's needed and speaks only once.